It is unclear whether Russia failed to take this obligation seriously or Russia has been incompetent. But this distinction doesn't much matter to the dead. We can't let this happen again.
All right, that is the new position of the U.S. administration, and it's a shifting line, and I get it. Obama failed with his red line. The U.S. is establishing a number of lines. Assad is out, Assad is in. Chemical weapons, they're not going to let that happen again. Good, by the way. But what does it all mean, and what does it mean for Canada? Here's Chrystia Freeland on what Rex Tillerson, who you just heard there, the Secretary of State, what he has to accomplish when he goes to Moscow to meet with his counterpart, Lavrov, the Russians, who essentially have supported Assad. Syria is a client state of the Russians. Here's Chrystia Freeland.
And I really do hope that Russia will take this opportunity to be on the right side of history.
Chrystia Freeland banned from Russia, by the way, for her position. Elliot Tepper is distinguished senior fellow at the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs at Carleton. He joins us now. Elliot Tepper, Professor, great to have you on the program. What do you make of this idea of trying to decouple Russia from Syria? Realistic?
No. I think there's several things that jump out right now. The real question, I think, there's many real questions. One of them is, how much is this is real brinkmanship, and how much of this is just political theater? What we just heard during the press conference from the defense secretary and the commanding general in the scene, and also from the statements, is that missile strike, which raised so much hope for those who were on the ground suffering, and we always have to start with their saying, no matter what you and I talk about geopolitics, what really matters is that there's enormous suffering. Syria is a carnal house. That the Russians have been told unambiguously that the U.S. doesn't plan to intervene in the civil war. That means that the strike, and the second message is, this was one-off unless sarin gas or a nerve agent is used. So the U.S. has made its point. You can't use chemical weapons that are banned under the existing two agreements that cover this, but the U.S. is mainly focused on ISIS. So Russia really maintains the position it had before. It's protesting mightily that their ally was attacked and they have to do something. But in fact, they remain they have the upper hand here, along with Iran and Hezbollah and the Assad regime, in terms of what's happening militarily and strategically on the ground.
Okay, where does Canada fit in on this? Can Canada do something outside of following the lead of the U.S., which remains, at best, difficult to predict?
The United States has made clear, once again today, that ISIS is the priority, and we are part of the coalition involved in fighting ISIS. So in terms of what we have been up to, in terms of our role, in terms of the future, fighting ISIS is the priority. We are part of that coalition, and there's no hint right now that there will be a new theater of operation opened up. The possible role for Canada would have been, as the G7 and elsewhere, but mainly the G7, was try to pressure Russia through sanctions to break its ties with Assad and, in turn, for Assad to go. But that's a lot of ifs, and none of them are realistic.
Let's talk about let's shift to North Korea, which threatened to have a nuclear attack on the U.S. as the U.S. steams a part of their Navy over to the Korean Peninsula. So you've got escalating tensions between Putin and Trump on one side. Now you've got escalating tension between Kim Jong-un and the world. And Donald Trump actually warning China, saying, do something about North Korea. And if you do, maybe your trade talks will go better, as if there's a link there. What do you make of that complicated neighborhood?
Actually, we can link these two stories, because keep in mind that whereas the military strike clearly in terms of Syria is one-off unless there's a very welcome removal of sarin gas nerve agents from the theater of operation there, the announcement was made while the president of China was sitting at dinner with the president of the United States. So if there's going to be a military message from the use of those missiles in Syria, it's probably being taken more to heart in Beijing and Pyongyang than in Moscow. The ratcheting up of tension around North Korea is very significant indeed, and moving the aircraft carrier strike force of Vinson back into position, they were there only 2 or 3 weeks ago for exercises, does seem to be a message that this crisis, which has been on the back burner, is moving toward the front burner. But as in the case of Syria, Evan, we don't see a game plan here. Where is an overall strategy involved? Very effective raising of the message by the United States, by the Trump administration to China. That's well done. But what's to come of it, and what happens if China doesn't act? I don't think any of that's been so far thought through.
Yeah, and it goes to the larger point. I speak with Professor Elliot Tepper. How do we know? Is there a benefit to the unpredictability of Trump, and is there a liability to the unpredictability of Trump?
The unpredictability is of benefit, I think, in terms of China not being sure really how far Trump would go. Remember, he was sitting right there when the missiles were launched. Or Pyongyang now wondering for the first time, maybe the U.S. will actually take action because they know that they, in their own mind, are impregnable. That is, there is no military option in their mind that could possibly work as long as Seoul, as long as the capital of South Korea, with its 10 million population, is held hostage to conventional artillery from the north. There's really no way to strike militarily that we can foresee effectively to take out the nuclear capacity of the north. Actually, cyber attacks seem to be the weapon of choice, and it's quite effective. Those missiles that they launch keep tumbling into the sea. What
do you make of Justin Trudeau's kind of quizzical comment? He paused. He kind of fluffed around. Right. He gazed off. It was odd. And then he finally said, I'm not going to call him crazy. Yes. But of course, he did call him crazy. What do you make of that comment, Trudeau on North Korea?
I think Canada, like every other state, is puzzling what can possibly be done. I'm not sure behind that particular statement, was he ruffling through some papers and lost his place, or was he really fumbling for words, or was he, as many are suggesting, just jet-lagged? Calling the leader of North Korea crazy is not inconceivable. Doing something about it, or saying that this leader crazy enough to be suicidal, is a different matter. And there's no sign that regime change through committing suicide by taking a military action that would lead to the destruction of the regime is on the cards. So basically we have here in Syria and in North Korea two of the most intractable problems, and I'm tempted to give a pass to the leadership of the world, saying we don't know quite what to do about this civil war in Syria. There never were good options. There's even worse options now. The Russians are going for a military solution with Assad and Iran and Hezbollah. They've been only slightly, it took them, less than a day to get back on track for that. And that war continues. Meanwhile, ISIS is doing their terrible thing. So North Korea is a very intractable problem. The Chinese have said publicly and privately, we don't like this fellow, but they say they want stability above all else. Well, I don't think you can have future stability in the region when you have truly a breakout state from an unpredictable, erratic regime like the North, which is also so murderous toward its own population.
Elliot Tepper, Distinguished Senior Fellow at the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs at Carleton, on North Korea and Syria. As you say, two more intractable problems. There are not, and I don't expect easy answers, easy solutions, but good perspective as always from Elliot. Thank you, sir.
Certainly. You're welcome, Evan.